So Arctic Cooling sent us these Accelero Hybrid-II 120s. So instead of focusing on the fact that the name is a bit of a mouthful, we slapped them on two 280Xs in Crossfire to see what kind of cooling benefits they provide. Spoiler alert, they're better than the stock fans.
UE Boom is the 360-degree speaker that drops bold, immersive sound in every direction. Rage, riot, party, and play the music you love out loud.
Now, when you're using a liquid cooler on a graphics card, normally you would liquid cool the GPU itself, then there'd be a heatsink that goes on the front of the PCB here. So the GPU is here, the video memory is here, the VRM modules are here, and everyone agrees that that kind of makes sense. Sometimes there's a fan. Well, Arctic Cooling says, screw that noise. This GPU cooler has a big old heatsink that actually attaches to the rear of the PCB. Is this a better design? Well, Arctic Cooling claims that it increases your graphics card service life and also slightly reduces the profile of the card in front of it while actually increasing it in the rear. If you have a single GPU, this is probably not a huge problem depending on your motherboard's PCIe slot layout. So of course, we had to go and test it in a multiple GPU configuration because Keys loves making things hard on himself. So first, a little bit more about the cooler. It's the second iteration in Arctic's hybrid series. The first had a more traditional cooler shroud with crazy angular styling, as graphics card coolers tend to have, while this one goes for function over form. It supports a wide range of cards from Nvidia and AMD. It has flexible tubes that are 420 millimeters in length, also known as 42 centimeters, and 11 millimeters in diameter, and a 120 mil radiator serviced by Arctic's 120 mil F12 fan, which produces only 0.3 SON. Because Arctic was like, screw decibels. We're measuring sound in SON. Onto the setup. The original plan was to use 3 Radeon R9 280Xs in Crossfire, but that became a problem because of the aforementioned back-mounted heatsink. There just wasn't room to install all 3 cards with the heatsinks attached in the test bench. So the team improvised. Keys and Anthony attached the entire cooler and heatsink to an XFX Black Edition 280X and left the heatsink off the other 2, a Sapphire Vapor X and an MSI Twin Frozer. Once installed, the setup was running pretty well. The lack of a heatsink on 2 of the cards didn't seem to affect performance in any way because they wisely used a top-down blower fan to take care of VRM cooling, running at a fairly high RPM. But before more testing could even proceed, some snags came up with the test bench that would be a whole other episode to get into, and long story short, with time running out, they went with 2 GPUs instead. One with the heatsink, one without. So compared to their counterparts with stock coolers, as you would expect, temperatures were much lower. In Unigine Valley, the water-cooled cards hit a max temperature of 55 and 53 degrees Celsius compared to 65 and 71 on the stock coolers, and Firestrike reported temperatures of 51 and 50 degrees water-cooled compared to 57 and 55 with stock coolers. Something you should note is that while there wasn't a huge difference, in temperature between the card with the back-mounted heatsink and the one without, of course, they were using a fan to keep them both cool, and that heatsink is for the RAN and voltage regulator modules, not for the GPU itself. Something else to bear in mind is that if you're using an open-air cooler like the heatsink that's going to be on something like a Twin Frozer card, it's going to kick around a lot of heat inside your case, and we're testing on an open test bench, so those, air-cooled versus water-cooled numbers might look a little bit more impressive if you're inside a case where this is going to exhaust the heat directly from your PC instead of letting it kick around inside. Now, while the team here didn't overclock the cards, the temperature difference should tell you that you'll have a little bit of more headroom to squeeze out of the card should you decide to do so. And as far as I'm concerned, there's not really too much else to say. These things have been done before. This is a novel approach, one that I'm not 100% certain that I agree with, because depending on the card, this whole clip-on system for this rear-mounted heatsink thing might not adequately cool some of the components that are on the other side. Maybe it would for the most part. Leave your comments below and let us know. Do you prefer the rear-mounted heatsink, or would you prefer something that's a little bit more difficult to do in terms of manufacturing, because you'd have to have different layouts for every board and cutaways for all this stuff? Or do you prefer just the one size fits all with like massive thermal goop pads? Guys, click here or the links in the video description if you want to look into this cooler more. That's pretty much it for this episode of Tech Tips. Thanks for watching. Like or dislike the video, whatever floats your boat, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this from ncix.com.